Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And Canada, there's a lot of news coming out of Canada. It seems like the country is collapsing slowly but surely.
And funnily enough, I'm gonna go be there soon to notice its downfall.
Okay, let's get right into it. I think I'm going to start with Pierre Poilievre because I put him on the cover tonight.
Sure.
And I'm glad he is back. I don't agree with all of his policies, but it's much better than Mark Carney. So
Anything is much better than my Carney.
well, hopefully Carney
not
wants to try to get a majority government and call a snap election because that will give Poilievre a second chance at a run at PM.
So, breaking, Pierre Poilievre just announced hitting the brakes on immigration as top priority. So, as the leader of the opposition, he said, secure borders by hitting the brakes on immigration and ending the wage-suppressing, job-ending temporary foreign worker program to put Canadian workers first.
Yeah, and he released a letter showing what he's going to go into next week when they reconvene Parliament. There, why don't we go into it a little bit? Fix the liberal cost of living. Oh, it was on the X.
Oh. So he says, my letter to Prime Minister Carney on the return of Parliament lays out the Conservative to-do list: fix the liberal cost of living crisis, fix the liberal job loss crisis, fix the liberal crime crisis, and fix the liberal immigration crisis. Our goal: stronger take-home pay, safer streets, and secure borders in a self-reliant Canada.
Yeah, and this sounds great to everybody except for Mark Carney. Mark Carney's going to have to come out with his budget very soon, and when that comes out, the veil's going to be kind of revealed. He's trying to cut costs while spend more at the same time. So it's a walking contradiction. He's literally going to cut costs from programs Canadians want, and he's going to spend money on military and other things typically that Canadians don't like spending on. So it's going to be interesting when he does release that.
And he said, our goal: stronger take-home pay, safer streets, and secure borders in a self-reliant Canada.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into it a little bit.
The article?
Oh, we have an article. I have an article that accompanies it here.
It says, Poilievre calls for temporary foreign worker program to be scrapped, and says plan would involve keeping immigration stream for agricultural workers, which is how the program initially started anyways.
Yeah, and it's not just the foreign workers program. There's actually a second program that's 10 times bigger than the foreign workers program, or a whole lot bigger than the foreign workers program, actually. And that's the real problem. And that just came out today. So people are going to start zeroing in on that as well. Immigration as a whole needs to come to a halt or extremely, extremely reduced in Canada. Canada used to have one of the best immigration systems in the world. So much so, South Africa, the United States, the EU, they all used to study how the Canadian immigration system worked before Trudeau. And Trudeau got in there and collapsed this whole thing. They want to artificially inflate the GDP of Canada to say they're doing a lot better than they actually are. The living standard of Canadians is greatly affected by immigration right now.
And if you didn't know who Pierre Poilievre is, he is the leader of the opposition of the Conservatives right now. He did run in the election against Mark Carney, but lost. Who knows why. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre wants the federal government to axe the temporary foreign worker program, saying it has flooded the market with cheap labor and made it harder for young Canadians to find work. The Liberals have to answer, why is it that they're shutting down our youth out of jobs and replacing them with low-wage temporary foreign workers from poor countries who are ultimately being exploited, he said in Mississauga on Wednesday.
And I'm fine with the policy, but he needs to take a much harder stance. The foreign workers program is actually a minority of the amount of foreigners coming into the country. So he needs to take a much harder stance on foreign immigration, at least for the next 5 to 10 years until they get this thing fixed. And it's funny because the NDP, what do you call the guy in BC? The premier of the NDP in BC is calling for even a harder stance on temporary foreign workers, and was actually calling out the corruption of the system and how companies are lining their pockets.
David Eby.
Yeah, David Eby.
The Conservatives will say that while they want the temporary foreign worker program, TFW program, scrapped, they will create a separate standalone program for legitimately difficult to fill agricultural labor. Canada already has a separate immigration stem for farm workers called the Seasonal Agricultural Worker Program, or SOP, or BITAT in Spanish. That I used to know somebody that worked at that program at the consulate. That's why I know quite a bit about that. That employs employers to bring in workers from Mexico and other participating Caribbean countries. Poilievre stressed that he doesn't blame the temporary foreign workers themselves, but the Liberal government and the Liberal corporate elites who he says are exploiting these workers to enrich themselves.
Yeah, without a doubt, that's true, but they need to take a look at beyond just the foreign workers program.
Because a lot of the immigration coming in is legal. It's not the same, it's not quite the same problem as the US has, which is what a lot of people imagine. It is that Canada has allowed millions and millions of people to come in to fill that gap in GDP, thinking that that's what it's going to do. But at the same time, they haven't done anything to fix the infrastructure problems, the healthcare problems. They haven't, all the like permitting for building any kind of housing is essentially stalled and it makes it impossible. So you're bringing people in to just have them live in misery, and then also giving them and promising them all of these great things that Canada has that when they arrive there, it doesn't really have it.
Well, then you're giving them citizenship into Canada after the temporary foreigners workers program was originally made. So companies had to show evidence that they can hire Canadian workers. They would bring in a temporary foreign worker in temporarily until they can find a Canadian to fill that job. Once the Canadian filled the job, when the foreign workers' time came up, they would then go back to their home country. That's no longer the case. They're giving them a direct path to citizenship. Over the last few years, we've seen immigration increased by the tune of 6 million immigrants. Plus, you have everybody that's in the foreign workers program and the temporary foreign workers program, which eventually get a path to permanent citizenship. That was never the case before.
And with the temporary foreign workers program, not the agricultural sector, what happens is that it is more convenient for business owners to get workers that way, especially if they're from also themselves a different country, because they get a bit of a subsidy as well from the government itself to hire these people. So it's like a loop of
it's not the companies are actually making a profit off of this. It's not so much they're getting a subsidy, which you're right, but they're putting the job ad out for $36 an hour. They're then getting the foreign worker in there. They're getting a subsidy for that $36 an hour. They're then paying the worker less than minimum wage and threatening them to deport them. So it's being corrupted on every level here, but it's artificially inflating the Canadian GDP. That's why the Canadian government loves it. If a country has 1% of its total population in immigration every year, that would be considered a lot. Canada is nearing 10% per year, which is absolutely crazy.
And he also said, not too long ago, young Canadians could gain vital skills in entry-level jobs, earn enough to pay for school and build a future, and said Conservative MP Michelle Rampell-Garner in a statement. In return, employers built a skilled domestic workforce, but the Liberals broke that deal. Poilievre said that while the Liberals promised a cap of 82,000 temporary foreign workers in 2025, the federal government has already handed out 105,000 permits.
And that's just for the foreign workers program. So again, like I'm saying, the foreign workers program is not the actual problem. Yes, it is a problem, but there are millions of more immigrants coming in through these other programs. And that was just revealed today.
If they do the same number of permits for temporary foreign workers in the next 6 months that they did in the last, they will break the record again.
Yeah,
said Poilievre.
Okay, we can go into the next story there. And I think it's Canada again and the fentanyl czar claiming that he has no actual power within the Canadian government.
Going to have to be careful with this story because the word. Canada's really bad substance czar reportedly told U.S. officials, I have no authority. U.S. officials say Canada's fentanyl czar admitted having no authority over our CMP, undermining Carney's assurances of historic border measures.
Yeah, and Donald Trump's going to be extremely angry, not just at this, but Carney is placating the U.S. government at every possible turn, saying that he's investing in military, saying he's investing in protecting the border, but actually they're writing off infrastructure projects as military spending and things like this when they have a border czar so they can tell Donald Trump and the three-letter agencies in the states that they do. The czar himself is saying, I have no power. I can't actually do anything when they're grilling him. Mm-hmm. So this is not going to help with the tariff negotiations whatsoever.
And he said Ottawa's newly appointed bad substance czar told U.S. officials in Ottawa he has no authority to influence Canadian federal police or border agencies, according to an official with knowledge of the relevant meetings. For U.S. enforcement experts, the admission underlined what they describe as the emptiness of Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney's high-profile pledges to crack down on transnational substance production and trafficking by Chinese and Mexican.
Real quick, go down a little bit. Keep going down. I want to see until you get to the grams. Keep going down quickly, please. Thank you.
I don't want to make people dizzy, and then I
Oh,
can't
okay.
because it's paid.
Okay. Well, I read the full article earlier. What it was saying is they've only made, I believe it was 2 busts, and it was in the quantity of grams, which is very, very small. And both those busts were made from U.S. intelligence sources, giving it to the Canadian. The Americans are saying they're getting no help from the Canadian side, and there are very few busts being made. But there's a ton of intelligence coming out from independent media sources in Canada that they're having industrial size labs that are there.
And as we've discussed before, I mean, a lot of journalists that have interviewed, for example, people, organized crime, people involved in that on the Mexico side have. Hey, what did you do? What are you doing?
Okay, keep going.
A lot of people have, a lot of journalists have interviewed people that work for these organized crime, etc. And they have said that they're not that scared of Donald Trump saying that he's going to be going after them and designating them as really, really bad people, the word with a T, because they know that they can continue to operate in Canada, and that is where they have set up base and continue to set up base because Canada seems to not be doing anything.
Well,
and now with this guy saying, well, I have no authority to do anything, it doesn't look good to what has already been revealed about how they're how they're operating both between Mexico and Canada and just leaving the States alone for now.
Well, criminal organizations absolutely love Canada because the punishments are very, very lax and the prison system isn't harsh at all. So even if you do get busted, it's not much of a punishment compared to other countries.
Mm-hmm. But also in Crazy Canada, apparently there's an issue with ice cream and sugary drinks, and the connection made here is quite a bit insane.
And I kind of brought this article up to highlight CTV News and the propaganda wings of the Canadian government. They're really sticking on this climate change thing, even when temperatures don't seem to be going up as projected, and ice is growing back in the Arctic Circle more and more every year since 2022 now.
And if you didn't know, mainstream or traditional media sources in Canada, most of them are subsidized by the Canadian government. So that's where the information comes from, really. So from CTV News, global warming linked to consumption of sugary drinks and ice cream in new research. We'll see from where the research is. People consuming more sugary drinks and ice cream on warmer days, particularly those with less money, could pose a growing threat to health as climate change drives up temperatures, new research warned Monday. Sugar is a major contributor to serious health problems such as obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, yet consumption of the sweet additive has surged across the world in recent decades.
It has nothing to do with climate change. And if people like sugary drinks, that's on them. They're in charge of their own health. We don't need daddy government coming in and telling us what and what not to do on every little thing. If I want to have my McDonald's ice cream, I'm going to have my McDonald's ice cream.
And it says, hotter days could be one factor nudging people to grab cooling sugary drinks like soda and juice or a few scoops of ice cream, according to a new study in the journal Nature Climate Change. And this just proves that all these scientific journals are full of BS. Your environment definitely shapes what you eat and how you eat, and climate change is a part of it. It might be an adverse influence on your health, study co-author Duo Chan of the University of Southampton told the AFP. The team of UK-US researchers analyzed data about the food bought by households in the United States between 2004 and 2019, and then compared the purchases to weather and other climate factors. For every extra degrees of Celsius within 12 to 30 degrees centigrade, people consume 0.70 grams of extra sugar a day. The modeling showed people with lower incomes or less education tended to be most affected.
Well, then I would assume that every country closer to the equator is having more ice cream. Is that the case? Or does that not correlate? Like, the way these studies are manipulated time and time again, this is why nobody trusts economists these days, and nobody trusts science and research, because they're
scientific journals
constantly manipulating the data.
And also, with this, I mean, they could be focusing on the impact that not having an adequate or appropriate healthcare system working in Canada, at least in Canada, has on the detriments it brings to how people's health. But no, let's just focus on saying, oh, climate change. And I mean, I drink soda when it's cold or when it's warm. So,
well, yeah, it's almost impossible to get a family doctor in Canada anymore. You're having to go to the emergency room or an emergency clinic to be seen, if you're lucky enough to be seen at all. If they had more preventative health care, they have a healthcare system that's supposed to be completely free of charge. Problem is, it doesn't work for anything, and they're not really trying to do any preventative medicine here, except they want to write articles about climate change and how that's affecting people's food choices, which seems a little bit ridiculous to me. And I think it kind of shows the ridiculousness of Canadian media in general, or mainstream media in general.
Because this was a study made between the UK and the US. So, I mean, it's not only Canadian media, but it does show the detriment of, and like how far the scientific, just science has fallen, is what I'm trying to say. But moving on to also a Canadian story, and what we reported on the strike for the Air Canada flight attendants, and it seemed like it was going to be over. First, it seemed like it was going to last forever. Then it seemed like it was going to be over, but now apparently they're back at it. So from Mark Nixon, breaking, Air Canada flight attendants rejected the wage offer by 99.1%. It isn't over. The strike is about to get even louder. Liberals thought they could mandate workers back. They just lit the fuse.
Yeah, this is a little bit ridiculous. This seems like a shisty move between the Canadian government and Air Canada to manipulate the workers. The workers had Air Canada by the balls when they actually went on strike, and then the government told them you have to go back to work, a back to work mandate, saying their strike was illegal. They said no for one day. Air Canada say, okay, we'll pay you what you want. You just have to go back to work. Then we'll have the contract written up. That was a complete lie. Now they don't have that same kind of leverage. A matter of fact, when they went back to work, they signed a new contract saying they wouldn't strike again or they wouldn't miss work, which is absolutely crazy. They have no more leverage. Air Canada has now had time to coordinate with the Canadian government or alternative workers if these workers decide to strike. So potentially they could fire all of these workers if they decide not to go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Don't want to support you. So from NBC News, Air Canada flight attendants reject wage agreement. Flight attendants said the raises wouldn't cover the increased cost of living, particularly in high-cost cities such as Toronto, with many doing 2 or 3 jobs to get by. And that is a just general problem. It's not just the flight attendants.
And a lot of this, they had the support of not just the Canadian people, but the world. This was making international news. Now that they went back to work and they're going to try to strike again, if they do, it's going to be hard to rally that kind of support again. I don't think they're going to be able to. This was just bad. This was bad leadership by the head of the union. They should have not been back to work until they had the contract written in full and signed off. The fact that they did, the Canadian government is obviously a union busting type of government. This is the 4th or 5th time they've given back to work orders to specific unions saying it's illegal to strike, back to work. Companies are getting so used to this that they're refusing to negotiate because they assume that the Canadian government is going to come in and give the unions a back to work order.
So Air Canada flight attendants overwhelmingly rejected a wage agreement on Saturday, with a bitter wage dispute now expected to be worked out through mediation as workers cannot take further legal strike action. Flight attendants at Air Canada and Air Canada Rouge voted 99.1% against ratifying the company's wage offer, the union said. Negotiators struck a tentative deal on August 19 to end a 4-day strike that stranded 500,000 passengers after flight attendants defied Canadian government efforts to end the strike, and the country's largest carrier was forced back to the bargaining table.
Yeah, and mediation is going to definitely come down on the side of Air Canada because they're going to look what other airlines in North America are paying, and they're not paying their flight attendants for the time before boarding or the time after boarding. And that was one of the big gripes here. But they're going to, I believe the mediation team will probably come on the side of Air Canada because they're just going to look what the other airlines are paying their flight attendants and give something similar.
However, Air Canada and the Canadian Union of Public Employees agreed that no labor disruption could be initiated, and therefore there will be no strike or lockout, so flights will continue to operate, the airline said.
Yeah, this is the weak union, straight up. Like they had everything. They had all the leverage. They could have got anything they wanted, and they decided not to keep striking.
Mm-hmm. But now another crazier news from Canada, where you can't have security cameras, and where you're also told to just comply whenever someone's robbing you.
This was a pretty insane story, actually. And in Canada, you have the rights to film anybody in a public space. So
from Ryan Gertison says Hamilton is forcing a homeowner to remove his security cameras, which are on his house and property. Only the government is allowed to watch you. Hamilton, Ontario, I guess. Let's see.
A Hamilton man has been ordered by the city to take down the security cameras on the outside of his home, even though he says a lot of the videos have been used to help with police investigations. Sean Cowan has more.
There, I have one on the other side. I have one there. I have one there, one there, one there.
Dan Miles says he has 10 security cameras outside his home on
Yeah, and he has 10 security cameras, and the police have come and used the footage for court cases. This is a high crime area, and he has caught crime in the past. The fact that the Canadian government is trying to step in here and saying you cannot film people on the street to protect yourself, and they want you to not even protect yourself in your own home. You do not have the right to defend yourself within Canada if somebody breaks into your home. An infant was recently assaulted in a home break-in, and then their life was taken.
McNabb Street North, downtown Hamilton, and he says he needs them.
Because we had a lot of attempted break-and-enters into our home and other homes around us.
Miles has posted videos of break-ins online. He also says police have asked him for his videos over the years to help with investigations. We reached out to Hamilton Police, and they say they can't confirm the use of Dan Miles' videos, but told CHCH News they often work with homeowners, businesses, and drivers to get footage. CHCH has used videos from Miles, like this one seen here, showing the moments before a fatal crash 2 years ago at Barton and McNabb.
These cameras are imperative to our neighborhood watch. They're imperative to the safety of our community.
But last week, Miles received an order to comply with the city's fortification bylaw, asking him to remove his cameras. The bylaw says homeowners are not permitted to view or listen beyond the perimeters of their own property.
A notice from bylaw.
So wait, like if you're sitting at your house and you see past your front yard, you're not allowed to see that.
Well, they're saying you're
can't
not
see
allowed to
that.
film, but there's no laws in Canada that say you're not allowed to film public spaces. So this is getting absolutely ridiculous. They're trying to set precedent without there being any law to kind of fortify that. So they're trying to set the precedent first and then bring the law in after.
I thought, how could this be? Everybody has Ring doorbell cameras pointed at the street and city property, and my neighbors have cameras pointed at my house, and we all...
The city of Hamilton has confirmed the order to remove the cameras to CHCH News, but said they cannot provide further comment because this is an active investigation. One neighbor tells us they're okay with the cameras.
Honest with you, it's absolute disappointment. I just kind of feel like here we have someone in our community who's going above and beyond to try and protect us. We've just been hit so many times again and again.
However, Anne Kavukian, the former Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, says people have the right to privacy on public.
And you don't have the right to privacy on public streets. So the fact that she's saying this, they're trying to make Canadians believe that they don't have the right to film on public streets, which they completely do.
Public property.
Privacy is extremely important. It forms the foundation of our freedom. So to go about filming everyone on the street without their knowledge and certainly not their consent, I find very, very unacceptable. Now, in your own personal area, your personal property,
The government is filming everybody at all times in Canada, especially in downtown environments. So for her to say that the people don't have the right to film, but the government does, this is just a contradiction in itself. I would be okay with, okay, you can't film the public streets if the government couldn't film the public streets either, but that's not the case.
that's different. And that's why you can do it right at the door of your house, for example, but always advise people what you're doing. Have a sign.
Dan says he has appealed the order from the city, but so far.
And it seems more and more that the Canadian government, Canadian law enforcement are coming down on the side of criminals. And I say this in a sense, understanding what's kind of going on in the United States right now. And that's, they're trying to really amplify crime. Oh, there's so much crime. The government has allowed millions of illegal immigrants into Canada, the United States, and Europe. And now there's a crime epidemic. We can understand why they're not bringing extremely educated people over. They're bringing people over that are somewhat impoverished and that are likely to commit crime in a high trust society because they don't come from a high trust society themselves. And now the people are demanding the government strip them of their freedoms in order to protect them. And I don't think that's necessary. I think the government can protect the people without having to strip you of your freedoms.
Yes. And Rafa, hi Rafa, says, hello guys. Hello Rafa, good night. And says they've been doing something similar, not sure if it in Mexico City or Mexico State.
Oh,
I
what?
don't know much about it. I'm guessing he means like not letting you film or have security cameras, which here it would be even more insane.
That's
because
crazy.
the government also has a lot of security cameras in most public areas. But usually in Canada, and because we were filming and I was trying to figure out what I can and who I can and cannot film, especially when I was working with Billboard Chris, there is no expectation of privacy when you're on the street. You cannot expect people not to film you, be it on their cell phone cameras or normal cameras. So by stepping onto the street, you're essentially giving consent to being filmed or being photographed at any point.
Yeah, but this is backfired on the Canadian government hugely because everybody has a cell phone in their pocket and headline news is being made every day at a lot of these stupid radical policies in a million different kinds of sectors in Canada. So the Canadian government would love to make it so people can't film on the street or can't film protests or can't film the engagement between civilians and police officers. So these things can't be exposed. It's very important that you have the right to film in public spaces in order to have complete transparency, whether it's on police, whether it's on protesters, or a million other things. Otherwise, there's no way to really bring it to the public attention.
And exactly, it is a way to curb also citizen journalism and people just, capturing things that could save someone's life in the end at some point.
Yeah, well,
or expose things.
And you see all this journalism coming out of Canada that is just completely contradictory with what's going on the ground with citizen journalists. So if they can stop the citizen journalists, now there's only one narrative available to the mainstream public, and that is the government-approved narrative. So I think this is some of the first steps to try to get rid of public filming, which I think is crucially important in a lot of different senses.
Yes. Do you want me to go into the article or just move on?
We can move on if you
Yeah,
want.
because the article says basically the same
basically.
thing. But let's continue to talk about Canada. And from Mark Nixon, Melanie Jolie says Canada has a clear advantage and our climate plan is working. What advantage? What's working? Canada has 0 GDP per capita growth in a decade. The only thing their plan has produced is a disaster.
Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, tried to set up this economic system where countries will only trade with other countries that have these climate taxes, these climate policies. Canada is completely invested. Mark Carney himself is completely invested. The businesses he's connected with are completely invested. But a lot of these countries around the world are now abandoning this because they can't compete with India, China, Russia, or even the United States. There's only a couple countries really sticking to their guns, and that's Germany and Canada. And we see their economies taking an absolute nosedive because they're unwilling to go away from this rigged system they tried to create. They still think it's possible that they can rule the world like a bunch of globalists if they can just get the system to work.
Mm-hmm. So let's see Melanie Jolie speak. She also worked for the Trudeau cabinet.
We have a clear advantage and we don't want to lose it. That's why our climate plan is working, but there needs to be adaptations based on what we're going through in the economy. And, we need to make sure that we provide a form of predictability. We'll work with industries on this. But, I've been hearing the conservatives saying that the EV mandates are the reason why the auto sector is going badly. It's so disconnected from the reality. It is because...
And these are just complete lies. The more they stick to these climate policies, the more their country and the more their citizens are suffering for. We left Canada. Thank God we left Canada because it's not headed in the right direction. And Canada is holding a line to this climate propaganda. And as far as EVs go here, they've just taken down the EV mandate because they realize car companies are leaving Canada. Businesses in general are leaving Canada because they're overtaxed. And one of the primary ways of taxing are these climate taxes.
Because of the decision of the White House that our auto sector is being targeted right now, and that businesses from the D3, from Ford, GM, Stellantis to Honda and Toyota, whom I'm in contact constantly, are taking decisions by the hour on how they will continue to do business in Canada. have a clean.
And they continue also blaming the US tariffs and it's all the US's fault. Well, the tariffs weren't there when this whole sector started tanking a few years ago, and when you mandated that people needed to have all electric by 2035. That was before the tariffs, and that was during the Justin Trudeau era, with Mark Carney whispering in his ear, and now Mark Carney is at the forefront, but it's still his own policies and his own stupidity.
Well, it's always orange man bad. Everything is orange man's fault. That's why the Canadian economy is failing. The Canadian economy is failing because you have an economist that tried to rig the system and it's backfiring on him, and he's unwilling to go into common sense policies and trying to compete or at least cooperate with the United States. So, I mean, you have one country that is very friendly to business and people starting businesses and growing businesses, and it has a business-friendly policies generally. Well, Canada has completely the opposite. I honestly think Mark Carney is trying to collapse the Canadian economy so the Canadian government can come in there and they can have socialism by giving out massive loans for percentages of manufacturing and businesses that Canada absolutely needs.
Companies, and also maybe even in trying to institute or just full out instituting a CBDC. If the economy is crashing, then that is a perfect time to get people on board with the CBDCs and maybe even a UBI, a universal basic income. So you get the people, you know, it's basically EI, what they did during the bad times of 2020, but now you have them even more and further controlled.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this today, actually, because they were talking about, I was watching some videos on YouTube about what happens if the dollar collapses? What happens to people's loans? If the dollar collapses and there's massive inflation, then you basically own your home because you can pay it off for pennies on the dollar. That being said, I think Canada is going to create a home crash before they're going to create a dollar crash. So in that home crash where mortgages go upside down, people are going to lose their homes first, and then the dollar will inflate. We're looking at a major housing crash in Canada. I was also watching another video about deregulated banking markets in Western economies, and a lot of these housing markets are now in big trouble because of the loan practices that they had. Mexico didn't have that problem. It's actually overregulated, but better overregulated than underregulated when it comes to housing, I think.
But speaking also of Canada, going to one of the other crazy parties that Canada has, which is the NDP or the New Democrat Party, they just released their rules as to who can join and be a part of it, and it's absolutely insane. From Alex Soltan, the NDP continues to be the most embarrassing political party of all time. They're now limiting nominations from cis men in their leadership race. Vasi points out to the leading candidate, Don Davies, who is presumably a cisgender man himself, that the rule is absurd and ridiculous.
No, and the culture is changing, and this actually made massive international news, and this is hurting the NDP. The NDP only has one major candidate right now, and it's the Premier of British Columbia, where Vancouver is at.
David Eby.
Week, I think arguably the biggest headline out of the official launch of the leadership race was that rule I mentioned in the introduction, that basically the requirement that at least 50% of the total required signatures must be from members who do not identify as a cis man. But do you get how that headline landed?
Yeah, and I don't share that sort of line from the media on that. There's a difference between identity politics and inclusion. And, you know, all parties have rules in their leadership races. So I think inclusion is a very, very vital component of our leadership race. And it's the way that you're going to get diverse policies and include as many people from all walks of life in this country in the very important decisions we're going to have to make moving forward.
But if you want more young people to vote or more young people to participate, do you say to old people that they shouldn't? It's the negative connotation, right? It's like cis men can't, don't, do not. The language, I would imagine, is important, and it does send a message.
Right. But again, that with respect, that interpretation is wrong. There is no don't or can't. As many people that want to nominate can. You can get 3,000 nominations. This is it's just that a minimum of the 500 required have to come from a certain group. There is nothing preventing anybody in this country from any group of signing nomination papers at all. So this is just to make sure that there is a deliberate attempt to reach out to marginalized groups, people that are often left out of the process so that we can bring people in, and that doesn't take away rights from anybody else.
So more than 50% can be from cis men?
It's of the 500, right? Of the 500 required signatures, a certain percentage have to be, but beyond that, anybody can nominate. So everybody is included and welcome in the NDP leadership.
But that's what's required, right? Those signatures. Like I think you're trying to say like this is made up, but like that is what is written.
No, it's a policy by our federal council that's intended to make sure that we are reaching out to as many diverse groups as possible.
And he's just trying to hold the line there, but it's absolutely ridiculous. He probably knows it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's going to hurt the party overall when you make headlines like this, when there is a major cultural shift happening, not just within Canada, but all around the world, especially as Canada begins to economically fail. And it looks like the United States is either staying the same or getting better. And if you're comparing Canada to the United States, yeah, it's not going to be a good situation here. Typically, if people do leave the NDP and they don't support them for policies like this, they go to the Liberal Party. That's why the media is really highlighting this, because the Liberals have been hemorrhaging voters lately or support for Mark Carney, and they've been going back to the NDP. So they're trying to prevent that by highlighting this fact, and that's the only reason this made major news in Canada.
And also Mexico, we're starting to get very similar policies from some parties and from some sectors, so it does infect other places as well. But, I mean, let's see what it actually says. The NDP leadership is underway, and the party is limiting signatures from cis men. Candidates hoping to succeed Jagmeet Singh, who was the leader, should be making themselves known in short order.
And it's two.
But I do want to look at
it's two crazy females that are actually have the lead here, and it's not going to be a good look for the NDP.
So let me find. Where does it say? I'm trying to find where the rules are. Rules indicated that at least 50% of the total required signatures must be from NDP members who do not identify as cisgender man, meaning a male whose reported gender corresponds to the reported sex at birth. The party also requires a minimum of 100 signatures from equity-seeking groups such as racialized members, Indigenous members, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and persons living with disabilities. The party did not immediately respond when asked how officials would reasonably verify if members identified as cisgender men or as being part of equity-seeking groups. Finally, at least 10% of the signatures must come from Young Democrats. The fee for the leadership race has been set at $100,000.
That's more of the thing. Like, if you want to include people from other classes, you should take down the monetary requirement of $100,000 here. But they want to have an elitist mentality, so only certain people are going to be able to get in that are financially and politically connected.
And I mean, again, the funniest part is how do they define equity seeking? Who's equity seeking? How are you going to verify if someone is LGBTQ+, or if they're just saying that? If they just take a picture with a friend and say, oh yeah, it's my girlfriend.
What's cisgendered man again?
You.
No, does that include Indian men, Chinese men?
Yeah, any kind of man, but that identifies as a man and is biologically a man.
Okay, well, that's not going to really work for their, that's not going to work for their party when there's massive immigration coming into Canada right now, and you want to appeal to the majority of those new voters. You're really half of those voters. You're just are automatically going to be against your party if you have policies like this.
And or they might not even understand what cis means.
Yeah,
because most people don't. Only crazy, insane liberals do and play by those rules as well. But we are now moving down to the United States, where apparently Chicago is building a wall. From Jesse Waters, Chicago's building a wall not to stop the criminals or illegals, but to stop Trump.
Yeah, they're trying to stop ICE from coming in and making busts, making deportations, things like this. They were completely against walls when it came to a border wall. Walls are racist. Now they seem to be building massive amounts of walls around federal buildings and other places in the city.
Because they are fighting between Chicago and the Chicago leadership and Donald Trump, who wants to bring in order.
Chicago's building a wall. Actually, lots of little walls. Pritzker's putting up fences around courthouses and City Hall. Why? To stop Trump from sending the Guard and ICE in. Pritzker didn't want a wall to protect the country, or to protect the country from illegals. He's putting up a wall to protect the illegals and criminals from Trump. ICE is expected to launch a major operation in just a matter of hours, and the National Guard could be sent in at any second. The city wants to help, but a handful of people are ready for battle.
They don't need a wall. Just line all these people up, and it basically covers the whole building.
Yeah, well, I
saying
mean,
they're
I don't. So I support Trump's policies more than the Canadian policies, but it's nice to have that direct contrast. You're having one country go one direction, you have another country go a completely opposite direction. So it's going to be very interesting to see which one succeeds here, which one actually has the good policies. Now, that being said, I don't support all of Trump's policies, and it is consolidating power in certain areas, which I wouldn't like to see in the hands of the Democrats. So if the Republicans don't win the next election, it could go awry. Okay, and let's go into the next story here if we can.
Which is, hold on. Oh, it's the, do you want me to read into it or?
Oh, no, we can just go to the next story.
Okay. Oh, this one's sad. From MJ Truth Ultra, but it also has appeared on other sources, and we'll go into that after. But it says, my God, breaking. Tom Holman has found 22,638. Is that number right?
Yeah.
Of the missing migrant children, 27 found deceased, 400 plus sponsors arrested. HHS, Homeland Security, says they found most of these children in deplorable conditions, a lot of them who were assaulted in a disgusting way. And should we watch it?
And this is what kind of needs to happen. They need to go in there hard, heavy, and let people know what's happening, because these children, there was a reason they were separating the children from the parents at the border under the Barack Obama administration, the Trump administration. I believe the Biden administration stopped that, but a lot of these weren't their parents, and they had to verify that these were their parents and they weren't being smuggled into the country for disgusting purposes.
And also the sponsorship requirements and the sponsorship vetting got way, way weaker during the Biden administration. So the people these children were being handed over to, and a lot of times nobody knew who they were or where they ended up going or why.
We found kids in very deplorable conditions, very dirty conditions. We found children who have been raped.
We got exclusive access to the team operating from what they call the War Room in Washington, D.C. Working under the Department of Health and Human Services, the team is made up of volunteers from agencies like the FBI and Homeland Security investigations. The team is entirely data-driven. They're focused on analyzing records and addresses to track down where these minors ended up. More than 22,000 unaccompanied children have been found so far under this Trump administration. 27 of the minors were found dead, either murdered or by suicide, car accidents, or drug overdoses. And more than 400 sponsors have been arrested.
We're talking about debt bondage, where children are being made to work off debt, trafficking debt. We're talking about children that were brought into situations and then treated like sexual slaves.
So we don't get hit with copyright. Okay, you can go again.
In early 2021, record number of children became crossing the border. According to HHS, between 2021 to 2024, more than 470,000 unaccompanied children crossed into the United States. Records show that many of these children were released to sponsors under very lax vetting policies.
Okay, and that's 500,000 children that were released. So that's a very small number that they have actually found, and it's very concerning in the state that they have found them. That being said, they need to continue this program. It looks like it needs to be financed because it's all based upon volunteers right now. At least that's what I got from that article.
Well, volunteers from other agencies. So like FBI volunteers, CIA volunteers. I'm guessing they're volunteering to move away from what their actual duties are to do this. So I'm guessing they're still getting paid. But in general, the whole conversation about immigration, this little uncomfortable fact always gets avoided by the Democrats, or avoided by the ones that continue to support illegal immigration and don't want to look at what actually happens when illegal immigration is just allowed to run unfettered.
Yeah, but they always love to talk
And who
about
takes advantage
they
of
always
it?
want to talk about kids in cages, kids in cages. This was the big talking point, and it was a big lie at the time. We've debunked that multiple times. They were separating parents from the children because a lot of these people weren't their parents. They had to verify. They were doing a lot of DNA testing to verify that.
And at the same time, during the Biden administration, when the vetting got relaxed for sponsors, then everything, and again, they lost a bunch of kids. They didn't know where they went. And when they were questioned about it, they would just say, oh, they're with the sponsors responsible people. But a lot of disgusting people could sign up to be sponsors. And I'll just mention quickly, I forgot the name now. Sound of Freedom. I mean, that doesn't exactly happen that same way, but in a lot of cases, these kids don't end up going to school and end up working as almost slaves in a slave-like system, or worse, or doing more disgusting things.
Okay, we can go into the next article here if you want.
Not the one that follows from this, right?
No.
And speaking of the U.S. and children still. From Nick Sortor, breaking President Trump announces the Department of Education will be issuing guidance protecting the right to pray in public schools. For most of our country's history, the Bible was found in every classroom in the nation. Yet in many schools today, students are indoctrinated with anti-religious propaganda.
Yeah, and I was a little bit conflicted on this, just because if you protect the right to pray, that's going to include Muslim prayer as well. And this thing can go really off the rail when you start, because the way religious freedoms are protected in the States, you're not just able to protect one. So in these, say you have 20% of your students are Muslim, are they going to demand class be stopped so they can have their prayers during class at certain times? So, yeah.
And also,
I understand why he wants it. And if it was for just Christianity, I would probably be for it. But
I'm still very hard and harsh. And today in our Spanish channel, I actually released an interview with someone who is very fervent about religion. And I do still consider the fact that church and state must be separated an important fact to protect both, not just religion and not just the state. But I think they work better as separate entities that cannot control each other or hold control over one another.
Also, you don't really need to protect prayer for Christians, because a lot of Christians go to Catholic schools or private schools where that prayer in private schools is already kind of protected because of the nature of the institution. He's going to protect it in public schools. That would protect a lot of different, like Muslims. Muslim prayer is a lot more intensive. Things have to be stopped in order to do this. Having other kids, it could go awry, but let's hear what he has to say. I understand the nature of the intent of it, though.
Well, he's also trying to appeal to the religious voter base right now. And I mean, midterms are coming up, so.
For most of our country's history, the Bible was found in every classroom in the nation. Yet in many schools today, students are instead indoctrinated with anti-religious propaganda, and some are even punished for their religious beliefs, and very, very strongly punished. It's ridiculous. Joining us this morning is Hannah Allen from Honey Grove, Texas. A few years ago, Hannah organized a group of her classmates to pray for an injured peer. The school principal declared that Hannah's generous act of love was prohibited from taking place.
Yeah, pause it for a second. And yeah, this is a little bit ridiculous when a principal comes in, especially in a situation like that. So, but I can see how this law will be broadened out by different activist groups. So,
of the other students didn't like it. The principal didn't like it. Can you imagine? But Hannah very strongly stood her ground, and she won. And Hannah, I just want to thank you for letting the light of your faith shine for all of those to see. We really appreciate it. And where is Hannah? Is Hannah here someplace? I think so. Hannah, stand up, please.
Poor Hannah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. I know what you went through. It's great. Appreciate it. To support students like Hannah, I'm pleased to announce this morning that the Department of Education will soon issue new guidance protecting the right to prayer in our public schools, and it's total protection.
Okay, yeah, and I can, but again, especially with tensions how they are. When you protect prayer in school, that's going to also protect prayer in Michigan schools, which are a lot of those are primary Muslim schools. It can cause a conflict between different religions within these schools. Again, a lot of religious schools are already private, so prayer is protected in them. That particular situation with that girl, I do understand that the principal maybe shouldn't be stepping in on that, but I could see a lot of conflict coming from this in general.
And I do agree, in Britain, there's this woman called Catherine Birbal Singh, who's been called the strictest headmistress in Britain, and me, having worked at schools and being very on top of discipline as well, and very for disciplining young kids, because that's also how you can show them and guide them instead of letting them do whatever they want. But in her school, which has some of the highest testing scores and all the scores in Britain, she's like the best school, she very purposefully said that nobody can pray in school. You come to school to learn and to do other things. And there was a huge row with specifically the Muslim groups that wanted specific spaces where to pray, and they got sued by the family of a Muslim kid that went to that school. And she ended up at the end winning against that lawsuit and being able to continue to say school is for schooling, and then you can do whatever else you want outside of it, but you have to be concentrating on the important subjects. And this also goes to not bringing in the other religions, which would be all the woke ideology, so all the LGBTQ stuff, all of the intersectionality stuff, all the feminism stuff. Just learn things and facts, and that's it.
What happens when you have like satanic worshipers that want their own place in schools? Because in a lot of the state capitals where the right to religion is protected, well, on their Christmas, different religions make different Christmas, get-ups. And so the satanic people always go there every year and make sure they have a satanic worshiping thing right next to the Christian thing.
Major?
So there's no reason to say that you would have to protect the kids that want to pray to Satan as well by this law. And that could be a problem. So not having prayer in school or only have it in certain private schools, and that private school would obviously be the religion of the attendance choice.
And yeah, freedom of religion is still important, whatever that religion may be, because again, freedom of speech, freedom of belief, but not within a school environment, especially if it's public, because then a bunch of things can happen, like we've just been talking about. And Rafa says, when I went to Philadelphia, I was surprised by the huge amount of people with towels on their heads. It's more all over the place than most people realize, I think.
Especially in the poorer areas, because the home prices are cheap, so immigrants will come over buy homes in Michigan, Detroit, places like this, Philadelphia.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to the article or move on?
We can move on if you want.
Okay, it's something about Elon Musk that I don't know what it's about. Elon Musk says, shame on Simon Harris for tyrannically blocking the will of the people of Ireland. Conor McGregor for president to save Ireland. And it says, Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister Simon Harris has ordered his party to block independent candidates, including frontrunner Conor McGregor, the fighter, from running for president of Ireland. This is completely undemocratic. The Irish people cannot stand for this.
Yeah, and we kind of keep it up on this story. And Conor McGregor had said he had enough political support to run for president. That being said, he does need other politicians to kind of vote for him to allow him to run. Originally, he was going to be blocked. Now he's saying he has the support, but one of the major party heads is saying his party's not going to support him. So it's going to be interesting to see if Conor can get in there. I do hope he does, even though he has a turbulent past, to say the least. Ireland is so far gone, they're going to need somebody extremely radical and it is going to speak up and has connections to the American administration to really undo a lot of the woke policies that the government's done over there.
Says are petrified Conor would win. Simon Harris demands all Fine Gael councillors to block independent presidential candidate nominations. And I think he was giving a speech or something.
Yeah, this is his real voice. So this is the guy that's opposing Conor McGregor and his party. He's not going to have anybody in his party support him or vote with him. His voice was strange.
Then he said...
And it wasn't just his accent. It was the pitch of his voice mainly.
Also from Killian, Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister Simon Harris, who is trying to block Conor McGregor from running for president, lashes out at Elon Musk for backing Conor. This is misinformation. Thank God Elon Musk has no say on who our next president is.
I mean, this is balderdash, Ben, and it's the latest attempt at disinformation and misinformation, which I see Elon Musk joined in today. Sure, why not? Backing a man who has been found civilly liable for rape in our courts. That's the sort of man he believes should be president of Ireland. Well, thank God he might have a say in who's president of the United States of America, but he's no say in terms of who the president of Ireland is. It's an utter nonsense, Ben. The Fine Gael party is backing the Fine Gael candidate. Hold the front page. I mean, this is...
Yeah, and so hopefully Connor does get in there and they can put this guy to rest. They need a little bit more testosterone over in Ireland's parliament.
Sounds like he did like a helium balloon. But now moving on to pretty far away, Japan. Because apparently Japan Prime Minister who wants to import mass amounts of people from certain continents into his country has resigned.
And Japanese people are some of the most nationalistic people in the world, and their policies have always reflected that. This prime minister wanted to have sister cities based out of Africa, and he wanted to begin to flood Japan with immigration. It's one of the few countries that have resisted. Now, I do understand that the GDP is not doing well, but you can still create a good quality of life for your people, even without mass immigration.
Okay, I'm gonna leave the video playing. I have to take something away from our dog because she's destroying it, but I'll leave the video playing.
And the thoughts of the people and the thoughts of the party, it's about how we think about the gap between the two. We always need to think about this. And I would not deny that there were various views on this. However, if the government is not functioning, this is not something that should happen for the benefit of the people, and that's why I decided to do this.
Okay, and that's that.
Okay, what do you say?
He's resigning. So I don't know if they're going to have another vote or somebody else is going to take over, but hopefully they don't continue with these immigration policies they were planning on. Up to this point, they've held a fairly good line on immigration, and Japan is in need of population increase, but these economists and these people that are running these countries are going to have to understand if they can't increase population, they don't have to bring in immigration. They have to figure out a way to create a quality of life with the people that you do have in your country. It doesn't always have to expand.
That's it. We do have an article about it, but Rafa says he dishonored himself by going woke. Time for harakiri.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube, but hopefully Japan YouTube doesn't understand. So from Time, we do have an article trying to kind of maybe explain what's happening.
Japan is in the most dicey situation of all the Western economies. It's Japan and the UK were really on the cutting edge of being the first countries to collapse in the West when this collapse does take place. The UK may be able to get bailouts from the IMF. So I know that there's been talk of that in recent days.
So from Japan, why another Japanese prime minister has resigned and what comes next. Less than a year after taking office, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba announced Sunday he would step down from the country's top office. I always said I wouldn't cling to this post and I would decide to resign at an appropriate time after doing what I needed to do, Ishiba said during a news conference, adding that while it was a painful decision to make, now is the time for him to pass the baton after securing a tariff deal with the US and Trump. Ishiba's resignation has been a long time coming, especially following 2 consecutive election losses for the Liberal Democratic Party, which he leads. The LDP, which has governed Japan for most of the post-war era, and its coalition partner lost their parliamentary majority in the lower house.
It's going to be interesting kind of what comes next, because did he go in there? Because that was quite a short term. Did he go in there to get the tariff deal with Trump? And now they have the tariff deal. It's secured. And the next politician that comes in there tries to cozy up to China, perhaps, trying to play both sides of the coin. I could see that happening. But let's see what they say here.
Since then, Ishiba has faced growing calls from within his party to step down. Ishiba made the announcement a day before the LDP was to decide on holding an early leadership election, in effect a no-confidence vote against him, similar to Trudeau at the end. In Japan, a premiership turnover is common, with the average tenure at about 2 years. And long-serving leaders like the late Shinzo Abe, who served 2 terms from 2006 to 2007 and from 2012 to 2020, are the exception, not the rule. Ishiba is now the 3rd revolving door leader since Abe, as the party enters one of its weakest eras, also at a time when Japan is reeling from runaway inflation and its citizens saddled with pocketbook issues. The leadership change in Tokyo is also happening under global uncertainties caused by Japan's traditional ally, the US, under Trump, according to them.
Okay, we can go into the next article there. And there's 2 more. The last article is actually probably the most interesting. Actually, both of these had to do with Russia.
Yes. I'll try to be careful about the words I say.
And I'm not a huge fan of jibby jabs whatsoever. So let's go into this. I wouldn't trust any jibby jab coming out from Russia, the United States, or any other country, especially if it's mRNA based, which I believe this may be.
And I would also take this with a pretty big grain of salt.
No, it was on multiple outlets. I just grabbed this outlet.
A lot of the outlets were Chinese media, but okay. From CNBC TV 18 from India, Russia's Enteromix cancer vaccine shows 100% success in preclinical trials. The vaccine not only proved to be safe, but also showed powerful tumor-fighting abilities. FMBA head Veronika Skvortsova explained that the vaccine was customized for each patient, tailored to their individual RNA.
Okay, so it's going to be interesting. All these mRNA vaccines, all the vaccines are being transitioned to mRNA, and especially with such a rocky road in the beginning with the COVID jibby jab, people just have a general distrust of vaccines in general, especially with the direction that the United States is currently going under RFK and a lot of the data that is currently being revealed under him. It's fact-based data that's showing the government really try to cover a lot of this mess up. So how are you going to get the general public to regain trust in these things? I don't know.
And this might be one of the ways they try to do that if they come out with an mRNA vaccine that is able to fight cancer, or at least appear to, even though there's contraindications as to what the other ones were doing with cancer, but whatever. Then that might be a way to get people to, get the buy-in into it being once again this great miracle drug.
Yeah.
But the vaccine not only proved to be safe, but also showed powerful tumor-fighting abilities. Sputnik, which was one of the manufacturers back in the dark times as well, wrote the Russian Enteromix cancer vaccine is now ready for clinical use. The Federal Medical and Biological Agency has announced. Russian scientists unveil messenger ribonucleic acid cancer vaccine ready for use.
Okay, and it'd be interesting. Does it fight cancer in the short term, but give you turbo cancer in the long term? I would really like to see long-term research on this, and yeah. Okay, let's go into the last one. This was probably the most interesting story for me of the day, actually.
From Gold Telegraph, Russia is warning the United States will leverage stablecoins backed by treasuries to offload 335 trillion in debt.
That's the entire national debt of the United States.
Pushing global adoption, then devaluing the dollar, leaving the world holding the bag. I explained this Genius Act weeks ago.
And I had been talking about, there had been rumors of the United States creating an internal and an external dollar. A lot of people believe that's going to be the regular dollar that exists now, and the other one will be the stable coin. One will work for imports, exports, and the other one will work as an internal dollar in the United States. This makes a lot of sense to me. If they go to stable coins and they have rumors out there that the dollar is going to collapse, everybody's going to sell their dollars, get into stable coin, that's going to collapse the price of the dollar, then they can simply pay off their debt with the stable coin. This makes a lot of sense, and it will also create a bit of a dollar panic, forcing people to exchange their dollars for stable coins when the stable coins are released, possibly. So I could see this plan actually working, and it's not so far-fetched.
Америка прямо сейчас пытается поменять.
Hold on then. The U.S. is now trying to rewrite the rules of the gold and cryptocurrency market. Remember the size of their debt, $35 trillion. These two sectors, crypto and gold, are essentially alternatives to the traditional global currency system. Washington's actions in this area clearly highlight one of its main goals. to urgently address the declining trust in the dollar. As in the 1930s and the 1970s, the U.S. plans to solve its financial problems at the world's expense. This time by pushing everyone into the crypto cloud. Over time, once part of the U.S. national debt is placed into stablecoins, Washington will devalue that debt. Put simply, they have a 35 trillion current currency debt. They'll move it to the crypto cloud, devalue it, and start from scratch. That's the reality for those who are so enthusiastic about crypto.
Yeah, and it could happen multiple ways. He's talking about devaluing the crypto side, but they could also devalue the dollar side. So the fact that there is the stable coins, they are currently being created, and there are other digital currencies. The U.S. holds a lot of power right now because they can make an internal and external currency and possibly devaluing one, inflating the other, and then paying off the one with the other. So I would be very concerned with holding all dollars or all crypto when the time comes.
Mm-hmm. And Rafa says a guide for identifying RNA versus traditional vaccines would be really awesome. If they gave one.
But the issue now is all the traditional vaccines are being transitioned into mRNA vaccines because they're easier to manufacture, quicker to manufacture, and they can manipulate them more easily. Mm-hmm. So they're not telling a lot of people that traditional vaccines, like the measles vaccine, is now becoming an mRNA vaccine. They're just calling it what it used to be called, which is get your measles vaccine or get your flu shot, which is now becoming an mRNA. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm sure on the black box warning for each of them, it might say what it's composed of and what it has, but I mean, you would have to ask the person, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, well, we have a really good video coming up on RUMBLE about that exact subject matter. Donald Trump is really going after jibby jabs pretty hard. So it's not just RFK. Trump, who was a classical supporter of Operation Warp Speed, now seems to be coming to a new reality, which is good.
And before we leave YouTube, if you usually follow me over to the Spanish channel for the live, that will start at 9:30 today because we started this one a bit later. And also tomorrow I will be on WDW Pro and I will put those announcements on the posts and stuff. So you can catch us there. But for now, follow us over to RUMBLE where we can actually speak about these things. Don't look annoyed at me.
Well, 9 o'clock would have been better.
Why?
Because 9:30 is going to be